I bought my first house when I was 25. Even now, looking back, I still can't believe the bank approved me. It wasn't some beautiful dream home either. It was a narrow, two-story brick house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood outside Cedar Falls, Iowa. The place had been sitting on the market for nearly 7 months because it needed minor cosmetic repairs, which was realtor code for the previous owners gave up halfway through renovating it. Still, to me, it felt like freedom. No more tiny apartment with paper-thin walls, no more neighbors arguing at 2 in the morning, no more landlord pretending to fix things. The house had old hardwood floors, creaky stairs, outdated wallpaper, and a basement that stretched beneath almost the entire structure. That basement was what sold me. It wasn't finished, but it was huge. The previous owners had divided it into sections using plywood walls and exposed studs, creating these awkward little rooms that looked like someone had started building a maze and then got bored halfway through. There was the main open area at the bottom of the stairs, a laundry section off to the left, a workshop space with an old wooden bench, and then, furthest back, a narrow storage corridor leading to 2 cramped rooms I never really used. The layout made the basement feel bigger than it was. It also made it impossible to see the whole thing at once. At the time, I thought that was kind of cool. Now, I know better. I'd been living there for about 8 months when everything happened. Up until then, life had settled into a routine. Work all day at the insurance office, gym after, microwave dinner, Netflix, sleep, repeat. The basement was basically just where I did laundry and stored junk I didn't know what to do with. I never spent more time down there than necessary, not because it scared me. At least, not then. It was just unpleasant. The lighting was awful. Whoever wired the place had installed these dim yellow bulbs that barely pushed back the shadows. Even standing directly beneath one felt like being lit by a dying candle. There was always this damp, earthy smell too, mixed with detergent and something metallic I could never identify. I remember the exact night everything changed. It was a Thursday, late October. Cold enough outside that the windows had started fogging at the corners. I'd gotten home around 9 after grabbing takeout and realized I was completely out of clean clothes. So I hauled my laundry basket downstairs. Halfway down the steps, something registered in the back of my mind. The basement lights were already on. I paused. It struck me as odd, but not alarming. I figured I'd forgotten to switch them off after doing laundry earlier in the week. Wouldn't have been the first time. So I kept going. The old wooden stairs groaned beneath my feet. At the bottom, I stepped onto the concrete floor and headed toward the washer. That was when I noticed movement. At first, it was just a flicker in my peripheral vision, a shift of shadow near the workshop section. I turned instinctively and froze. There was a man crouched behind my folding utility table, watching me. For a second, my brain couldn't process it. The image refused to make sense. He was just there, like he'd always been there. Like he belonged. He looked filthy. His hair was matted and uneven, hanging past his ears in greasy clumps. He had a patchy beard and wore what looked like 3 layers of stained clothing. His skin had this grayish, sickly tone, and his eyes. I still remember those eyes. Wide, unblinking, focused entirely on me. Neither of us moved. I was too shocked to react. Then he stood. Not slowly, not cautiously. He exploded upward and bolted deeper into the basement, straight toward the back storage rooms. The sound of his footsteps snapped me out of whatever paralysis had gripped me. I stumbled backward toward the stairs. That's when every light in the basement went out. All at once. Complete darkness. Not dimness, not shadow. Pure black. The kind that feels physical, like it presses against your face. I couldn't even see my own hand. My stomach dropped. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. Then, Panic took over. I turned and tried to run for the stairs, but in that darkness, with adrenaline scrambling my sense of direction, I misjudged where I was. My shin slammed into something hard. I pitched forward and hit the floor. The laundry basket flew from my hands. Clothes scattered everywhere. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs. I scrambled upright, disoriented. Somewhere in the darkness, I heard movement. Slow footsteps. Then silence. I started screaming. I didn't plan to. It just happened. Raw panic tearing itself out of my throat. And then, from somewhere across the basement, he screamed back. I've never heard anything like it. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't a yell. It was this animalistic, guttural shriek full of rage and madness. The sound bounced off the concrete walls, making it impossible to tell where he was. I stopped instantly. So did he. The silence afterwards was worse. I crouched there in the dark, listening, trying to orient myself. Then I heard breathing. Close. Too close. I dropped to my hands and knees and started feeling blindly across the floor, desperate to find the stairs. Concrete, scattered clothes, a table leg. Then nothing. Behind me, another footstep. Slow, measured. Like he knew exactly where I was. Like he'd done this before. I crawled faster. My hands scraped against rough concrete. My palms burned. Then my fingers brushed wood. The staircase. Relief hit so hard I nearly cried. I grabbed the bottom step and pulled myself up. That was when something seized my ankle. The grip was iron. I screamed and kicked wildly. My foot connected with flesh. The hand loosened just enough. I twisted free and lunged upward. My shoulder slammed into the railing. Pain shot through my arm, but I kept climbing. 2 steps. 3. 4. And then a hand brushed the back of my calf. I practically launched myself the rest of the way. At the top, I threw myself through the basement door and slammed it shut. The problem? There was no lock. And almost instantly, something hit the other side. Hard. The entire door shuddered. I planted my feet against the kitchen tile and pushed with everything I had. Sweat poured down my face. My legs shook. On the other side, he kept slamming into it. Again, again, again. Then, suddenly, silence. I stood there trembling, barely daring to breathe. And from the other side of the door, inches from my face, I heard a voice. Calm, low, almost conversational. He said, "You weren't supposed to see me." And then I heard slow footsteps descending back into the basement. That was the moment I realized something horrifying. This man hadn't just broken into my house. He'd been living down there. And judging by how easily he moved through that darkness, he knew that basement far better than I did. For nearly 30 seconds after the footsteps faded, I stayed pressed against the basement door. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My entire body felt locked in place, every muscle trembling so violently it made my teeth chatter. The silence on the other side was unbearable. I kept expecting another impact, another violent slam against the wood. But nothing came. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that feels deliberate. Like someone is standing perfectly motionless, listening, waiting. My phone was on the kitchen counter about 8 feet away. It might as well have been on another planet. The thought of stepping away from that door made my stomach twist. But eventually, survival instinct won out. I eased backward 1 inch at a time, never taking my eyes off the handle. The second my fingers touched my phone, I snatched it up and dialed 911. My voice barely worked. I remember stammering through the address, trying to explain that there was a man in my basement. The dispatcher kept asking if I could confirm whether he was still inside. I looked at the door, at the faint vibration of the handle, and then it moved. Just slightly. A tiny rattle, like someone testing it. I whispered. He's still here. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way and instructed me to leave the house immediately. That should have been simple. Front door, 10 feet. But getting there meant turning my back on the basement, and some irrational part of me was convinced the second I did, that door would burst open. Still, I forced myself to move. I backed toward the front entrance, never taking my eyes off the basement door. It remained closed, still, watching. The moment I reached the porch, I sprinted barefoot across the lawn to my neighbor's house. A retired couple named Harold and Denise lived there. I pounded on their door like a madman. Harold answered in his robe, looking annoyed right until he saw my face. He ushered me inside without a word. The police arrived 7 minutes later. Longest 7 minutes of my life. 2 patrol cars, 4 officers. I watched from Harold's living room window as they approached my house with flashlights drawn. One entered through the front, the others circled around back. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then one of them emerged from the rear basement window well and waved the others over. They all disappeared from view. Another 10 minutes passed. Finally, an officer knocked on Harold's door. His expression told me everything before he even spoke. They hadn't found him. He was gone, escaped through a basement window. At first, that explanation made sense, until they showed me what they'd found. The back storage room had been transformed into a living space, not in any normal sense. It looked like something pieced together by an animal trying to imitate human behavior. Old blankets stolen from my linen closet had been layered into a crude bed. Empty food containers lined the walls. There were dozens of bottled water jugs, a flashlight, several changes of filthy clothes, and taped to the exposed studs were photographs of me at work, leaving the gym, taking out my trash, walking to my mailbox, some taken from across the street, others from much closer, close enough that I should have noticed. One picture had been taken through my living room window at night, me asleep on the couch. That was the one that made my knees nearly buckle. He hadn't just been living beneath my house. He'd been watching me, studying me, learning my routines. The police searched the neighborhood until dawn. Nothing. No fingerprints in the room matched anything in the system. No useful DNA. The man had simply vanished. The detective assigned to my case believed he'd likely been homeless, possibly living in vacant houses for years. He said some people become incredibly skilled at occupying hidden spaces undetected. But even he admitted there were details that didn't add up. The precision, the surveillance, the way he'd cut the basement power from the breaker panel in total darkness. That wasn't random desperation. That was familiarity, preparation. I stayed in a hotel for the next week, then another, then another. Every night I lay awake replaying what happened, the way he screamed back at me, the grip on my ankle, that voice through the door. You weren't supposed to see me. Eventually, I returned to the house with 2 friends to gather essentials. Walking inside felt wrong, like entering someone else's home. The basement door was still splintered from where he'd slammed into it. I refused to go near it. While packing clothes upstairs, One of my friends called out from the kitchen. His voice sounded strange, tight, uneasy. I came downstairs and found him standing by the counter, staring at something. It was my fruit bowl. Inside it sat a single red apple, fresh, perfectly polished, and pinned into it was one of my kitchen knives. Wrapped around the handle was a strip of notebook paper. 5 words were written in shaky black ink. "You left too soon." The police were called again. They searched the entire house. No signs of forced entry, no open windows, no footprints, nothing. Whoever left that note had either been inside when we arrived or still was. That was enough. I sold the house 2 months later for far less than it was worth. I didn't care. I just wanted it gone. The buyers were an older couple relocating from Nebraska. I considered telling them. More than once, I opened my mouth. But what would I even say? By the way, a man may have secretly lived beneath this house for nearly a year and might come back? It sounded insane. So I said nothing. I moved to an apartment downtown, 3rd floor, no basement. For a while, life slowly returned to normal, or something close to it. Then, 6 months after moving out, I got a call from Detective Lawson. I hadn't spoken to him since the sale. His voice was unusually subdued. He asked if I was sitting down. The new owners had called police after hearing noises in the walls. At first, they thought it was rodents. Then they discovered a section of paneling in the basement workshop had been altered. Behind it was a narrow crawl space running beneath the entire foundation, large enough for a person to move through. Inside, police found signs of long-term occupation: food wrappers, blankets, batteries, and a tunnel entrance leading beneath the neighboring vacant property, a hidden route no one knew existed. The man had never escaped through the basement window that first night. He'd gone deeper into the walls, and while police searched my house, he'd been crawling silently beneath their feet. They never caught him. No sightings, no trace. The crawl space was sealed with concrete. The adjoining property demolished the following year. Officially, the case remains unsolved. But there's one thing I've never told anyone. 3 weeks after Detective Lawson called me, I checked my mailbox. Inside, among the bills and junk mail, was a plain white envelope with no stamp or return address. Just my name written neatly across the front. Inside was a photograph. It showed me asleep in my new apartment, taken from inside my bedroom, standing at the foot of my bed. And written across the bottom in black marker were 4 words: "Better luck this time." I was 14 the first time I truly understood what fear felt like. Not the kind you get from watching a horror movie, not the kind that comes from telling ghost stories around a campfire. I mean real fear. The kind that crawls under your skin and stays there. The kind that changes the way you hear ordinary sounds forever. Even now, almost 20 years later, I still can't hear a repetitive tapping noise at night without feeling that same cold pressure settle into my chest. Back then, my family lived in a quiet suburb just outside Lexington, Kentucky. The neighborhood was one of those places that looked almost unnaturally normal. Every lawn was cut, every mailbox stood perfectly upright. Kids rode bikes in little groups until sunset. Parents waved to each other while collecting mail. Nothing bad ever happened there. At least that's what everyone believed. Our house sat near the end of a cul-de-sac, 2 stories, pale blue siding, white shutters, and a large unfinished basement beneath it. The basement had always unsettled me. Not because anything bad had ever happened there. It just had that atmosphere. Concrete walls, low ceilings, exposed pipes overhead, a single naked bulb hanging above the stairs, and several small windows set high into the foundation, just wide enough for moonlight to spill through in thin, pale strips. There was also a tiny kitchenette down there that the previous owners had built decades earlier. My parents mostly used the basement for storage: old furniture, holiday decorations, boxes of junk no one ever unpacked. As for me, I only went down there for one reason: video games. My parents kept our old television in the basement rec room, along with a beat-up leather couch and my game console. To 14-year-old me, it was paradise, especially when my parents weren't around. This all happened during the fall of my freshman year. My parents had to drive to Indiana for a weekend wedding. Originally, my older sister Claire was supposed to stay with me. She was 20 and living at college about an hour away. But right after my parents left that Friday afternoon, she texted me, "Sorry, something came up, can't make it." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just typical Claire. Honestly, I didn't care. Being home alone for the weekend felt like winning the lottery. No rules, no bedtime, no one telling me to stop playing video games. That first evening was perfect. I ordered pizza, watched TV, then spent hours in the basement trying to beat an impossible level in an old racing game I'd been obsessed with. By midnight, the house was completely silent. No traffic outside, no dogs barking, nothing. Just the soft electronic hum of the television and the occasional groan of old pipes shifting somewhere behind the walls. I was halfway through a race when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. At first, I barely noticed. It sounded distant, faint, like a branch brushing against the siding outside. I paused the TV and listened. Nothing. After about 30 seconds, I shrugged and unpaused. Then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it sounded closer, deliberate, like knuckles lightly rapping against wood. I muted the TV. The sound stopped instantly. I sat there, staring toward the basement ceiling, listening hard. Still, nothing. After a minute, I convinced myself it was probably just the wind. The weather had been rough all week. Branches scraping against houses wasn't exactly unusual. So I turned the sound back on and kept playing. About 20 minutes later, I heard it again. But this time, it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from below me, from somewhere deeper in the basement. 3 slow taps, then silence. My stomach tightened. The rec room sat above the unfinished storage area. If the sound was coming from beneath me, that meant it was somewhere in the darker rear section of the basement. I muted the TV again. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was louder now, more distinct, and unmistakably intentional. I set the controller down. Every instinct told me not to investigate, but the human brain has this frustrating need to explain things, to make sense of them. I told myself it was probably a raccoon, maybe a possum that gotten in through one of the basement windows. That explanation made enough sense to get me moving. The unfinished section of the basement was separated from the rec room by a narrow doorway with no actual door. Beyond it was darkness. The single overhead bulb didn't reach far enough to illuminate much, and the light switch for the storage section was at the far wall, a good 30 feet in. There was absolutely no way I was walking that distance in the dark. So I did something that, looking back, was incredibly stupid. I pulled out my flip phone. Yes, an actual flip phone. This was 2008. The camera quality was terrible, but it had a flashlight feature. I stood at the threshold and aimed it into the darkness. The weak little beam barely reached halfway across the room. Boxes, shelving, old paint cans. Nothing unusual. Then, tap. The sound came from the far right corner, near one of the basement windows. I jerked the phone toward it. Still nothing.
just darkness. "Hello?" The tapping stopped immediately. That was the moment real unease crept in. Animals don't stop because someone says hello. I backed away from the doorway, fast. My pulse had started hammering. I should have gone upstairs right then, should have locked the basement door and called someone. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. I crouched beside the doorway and extended my arm as far as possible, angling the phone around the corner to record video with the flashlight on. Then, I shut my eyes, held it there for 5 seconds, and yanked it back. I slammed the basement door shut and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I flipped it opened the video. For the first few seconds, all it showed was blurry shelves and concrete floor. Then the camera shifted slightly, and there he was, standing perfectly still beneath the far window. A man, tall, thin, wearing dark clothing, his face mostly hidden in shadow, but I could make out enough. Pale skin, sunken cheeks, and eyes reflecting the weak light like an animal's. He wasn't moving, wasn't startled. He was just standing there, watching me. I screamed. Not some dramatic movie scream, a raw, involuntary sound of total panic. I dropped the phone and bolted upstairs. I locked myself in my bedroom and called my dad. The moment he answered, I started sobbing, trying to explain through gasps that there was someone in the basement. My dad must have realized instantly I wasn't joking. He told me to stay on the line while he called 911 from his other phone. I sat on my bedroom floor, clutching the phone, listening. For nearly a full minute, everything was silent. Then came the first bang, a violent crash from downstairs. The basement door. Something had slammed into it. Again. Another impact, harder. The frame rattled. I could hear wood splintering. Then another. And another. Each hit stronger than the last. Whoever was down there was trying to break through, and judging by the force of it, he was very, very determined.
The fourth impact was loud enough to shake my bedroom floor. I sat frozen against the wall, phone pressed to my ear so tightly it hurt. Downstairs, wood cracked. A heavy splintering sound echoed through the house. My dad's voice came sharply through the speaker. "Ethan, listen to me. Stay in your room, lock the door, and push something in front of it." His words barely registered. All I could hear was the pounding below. Boom, boom, boom. Each hit against the basement door felt like it vibrated through the foundation itself. The basement stairs were directly beneath the hallway outside my bedroom. If that door gave way, whoever was down there would be upstairs in seconds. I scrambled to my feet and shoved my desk chair beneath the doorknob. Then I dragged my dresser halfway across the carpet until it jammed against the doorframe. My breathing was ragged. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. Then the banging stopped. Just like that. Complete silence. That somehow felt worse. I stayed there, staring at my bedroom door, waiting for footsteps, waiting for the sound of someone climbing the stairs. But nothing came. My dad stayed on the line. He kept talking, probably trying to keep me calm, though I couldn't process most of what he said. Every tiny creak of the house made me flinch. Minutes dragged like hours. Then, finally, sirens. Faint at first, then growing louder. Blue and red lights flashed across my bedroom walls. I nearly collapsed from relief. A voice shouted through a bullhorn outside. "Police! If anyone is inside the residence, come to the front door with your hands visible." I yelled back so loudly my throat hurt. "It's me! Upstairs!" The next few minutes were chaos. Heavy footsteps thundered through the house. Voices shouting commands, doors opening, more footsteps descending into the basement. Then silence again. An officer eventually knocked on my bedroom door and identified himself. When I opened it, There were 3 officers standing there. One of them immediately asked if I was hurt. I wasn't, at least not physically. The basement, however, was empty. The intruder had vanished. Police searched every inch of the house. Nothing. No person, no immediate explanation. But they quickly found how he'd gotten in. One of the small basement windows had been forced to open from the outside. The latch had been snapped clean off. The officer who examined it said it looked like someone had pried it open carefully enough that the damage wouldn't be noticeable unless inspected closely. Whoever had entered knew exactly what they were doing. They also found something else. The kitchenette drawers had been rummaged through. One knife was missing from the butcher block, the largest one, an 8-inch chef's knife my mom used for carving roast. That discovery changed everything. Up until then, there was still room to believe maybe it had been a burglary, a trespasser, someone looking for valuables. But burglars don't usually hide silently in basements, and they don't arm themselves before trying to break through doors. The police searched the neighborhood for over an hour. Nothing. No footprints, no suspicious vehicles, no witnesses. It was as if the man had dissolved into the night. My parents came home before sunrise. I'd never seen my mother cry like that. She practically tackled me the moment she walked through the front door. My dad inspected the basement door in silence, his expression harder than I'd ever seen. By noon the next day, he had deadbolts installed on every exterior door. The basement windows were reinforced with steel bars. And for the next month, he checked every room in the house before going to bed. Life slowly returned to something resembling normal, at least on the surface. But the house felt different after that. Unsafe, polluted somehow. Every creak made me jump. Every unexpected sound sent adrenaline flooding through me. I stopped going into the basement entirely. The television stayed down there gathering dust. My game console remained unplugged for almost a year. The police never found the man. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing useful. The detective assigned to the case believed he was likely transient, possibly someone moving through neighborhoods looking for vulnerable homes. That explanation made sense. It should have been enough. But there was one detail that never sat right with me: the tapping. Months later, while helping my dad clean the basement, I finally worked up the nerve to inspect the area beneath that window where the man had been standing. The concrete floor there looked normal, until I noticed a faint scuff mark. I crouched down and brushed away some dust. Underneath was a tiny metal hatch embedded in the floor, square, about 8 inches across, almost completely concealed beneath old shelving. It had likely been there since the house was built. We pried it open. Inside was a narrow shaft descending into darkness. My dad thought it was some kind of old drainage access, but when he shined a flashlight down, we could see it opened into a horizontal crawl space, big enough for a person to move through. The detective came back to inspect it. Turns out the crawl space connected to a stormwater maintenance tunnel running beneath several homes in our neighborhood. Most of the access points had supposedly been sealed decades earlier. Ours hadn't. The detective believed that's how the intruder entered. Not through the window. The window was likely forced afterward as a decoy. He'd come up through the crawl space, into our basement. And when police arrived, he simply went back down, disappearing beneath the neighborhood itself. That revelation haunted me. For years, I imagined him down there, crawling through those dark concrete tunnels beneath our feet, listening, waiting. Eventually, my parents sold that house. They never told the buyers what happened. I don't blame them. What could they even say? By the way, your basement connects to a hidden tunnel system a stranger used to enter the house. We moved across town. I thought that would be the end of it, and for a long time it was. Until last year. I was visiting my parents for Christmas. We were sitting in their living room when my mom casually mentioned that our old house had gone back on the market. Out of morbid curiosity, I looked up the listing online. Most of it was exactly how I remembered. Same siding, same front porch,
Same ugly shutters. Then I reached the basement photos. One image showed the old rec room, and in the far corner, reflected faintly in the dark glass of the basement window, was a face. Pale, thin, watching from outside. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. Then I zoomed in, and there, unmistakably, was the reflection of a man smiling, holding one finger to his lips, as if asking for silence. The listing was removed less than 24 hours later. The house was never relisted. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear that slow, deliberate rhythm in my dreams. Tap, tap, tap.